Welcome back to Wine Country at Work, where we talk about wine tourism and the wine business that makes it possible. This next interview is actually something we did 9 years ago with Chris Benziger up at the Benziger Winery. It's all about how the family came to biodynamics, and actually especially Mike Benziger, his process, and Chris's own experience with how this changed the land around them. I think it was a wonderful interview, especially because we did it as part of our TV show, Wine Country at Work. So we followed Chris all over the property with a camera, and the footage is beautiful. And you can find that if you go on YouTube and just look up Wine Country at Work and then scroll down and you'll find the entire show. But the discussion we had was very revealing and very informative, and I appreciate Chris taking the time to do it. So Chris, what I really want to know is what your family's experience has been from being biodynamic farmers.
So for me, the cool thing is I can tell you the real life experience of being a conventional farmer and then the transition to biodynamics. Because we've been living in this farmhouse here for about 35 years. And when we first moved out here, it was 1980, Halloween of 1980, we came out here and we farmed conventional because we didn't really know any better. And we just kind of went out there and all our neighbors farmed a certain way and we kind of saw what they were doing, we kind of copied them. I kind of call it the spray and pray method. But, you know, if there was a problem in the vineyard, you talked to the Monsanto guy and he gave you a big bag of methyl ethyl bad stuff and you went out and nuked the vineyards. But see, prior to this, the property had been left vacant for 50 years, so it was a beautiful garden. It was in great shape because no one really had farmed it, so it was left to its own devices. It was very healthy. But then we got in there, we cleared the land, put up the fencing and started spraying and planting grapevines. And every year I watched that property slowly die and die and die. And then you fast forward 10 years and I remember walking through the vineyards and the grapes looked good, but there was no cover crop. It was dirt, and that dirt was either rock hard or it was pulverized talc. Every time it rained, there would be erosion issues. We had phylloxera, we had nematodes, outbreaks, and worst of all, our wine quality wasn't getting any better. And for me, the big moment was I remember being in the vineyards, and the only sound I heard was wind. Oh. No bugs, no birds, nothing. And I realized that, man, this was a sad piece of property that 10 years prior was a healthy garden. So we knew we needed to switch. And that was about 1994. And we started to bring in biodynamics that we learned from the Ciego vineyard up in Mendocino and Alan York, God rest his soul. We brought in our practices, and it took us about 6 years to transition the property. In the first 3 years, it was very tough. We almost gave up. But then we saw how some of the European properties did it, and that gave us the kind of energy to pursue it to its end. And then in 2000, we started to see the fruition. We started to see this piece of property come back to life. And now we fast forward a couple more decades to 2016, and you walk out in that vineyard, and it's every bit as healthy as it was when we first moved here in 1980. The only difference is that it's a working farm, where before it was left fallow. Now it's a beautiful working farm that makes incredible wine and olive oil and figs and vegetables. All sorts of wonderful things are grown on this property now because of biodynamics.
And don't forget the kiwis.
The kiwis, that's right, the fuzzy grapes. Yeah. So for me personally, I watched it happen. I didn't really know what was going on, but I watched it. So you will find no more of a true believer in biodynamics than myself.
There's nothing like one's personal experience, especially when you're living around it, because just very recently they were saying how the highest cancer rates in the state were in this region. And I very much attribute it to the chemicals used in the vineyards.
Well, it has to be. It has to be. It's the only thing that's changed. And for me, just to see a piece of property rebound and then kind of come back to life, it's amazing. And you walk out on this piece of property now, and it's breathtaking the amount of activity that's going on, natural activity, and you see it work.
I know it because as a tour guide, I visit hundreds and hundreds of wineries and thousands of vineyards, and it's very remarkable when I come here. The feeling on the land is distinctly different. When I go into land, which they've been using chemicals, and I feel it.
Yeah.
My body reacts.
You can feel it. I smell it. That's the first thing. When you like drive down into some of these production farms, you smell it. It's a very distinct, very unnatural chemical smell. But like you said too, you can also feel it, and it's probably more tactile and hearing and everything together. But you know when you're on a healthy piece of property because it surrounds you.
Well, what's interesting for me is when you look at biodynamics, it's as if you're having a conversation with the land. You're treating it as a living
That's
organism.
a wonderful, I love that how you say that, a conversation land, because that is what you're having there. And with that, the land kind of, it speaks to you and it lets you know, because we actually, we had 65 acres of grapes back then when we were farming this property unbalanced. Now we have it down to 40. Those other acres, I referred to them, the entire piece of property is 85 acres. We have 40 acres under vine. Those 45 acres are now the supporting cast, if you will, that makes the 40 acres of vines, the lead actor, more believable. And so they bring back the life back into those acreage, whether it's riparian or pasture land or gardens, insectaries, orchards, groves, all this stuff brings this property back to life.
Whose idea was it to start the educational component?
That would have to be my brother Mike. He was very instrumental. He always believed in biodynamics. Back in the 70s, he had a book that he carried from home to home to home. Wherever he went, he always had this book. And it spoke to him, literally. And that's what gave him the idea to switch over to biodynamic farming. And when Alan York, who was very instrumental in helping us consult to become biodynamic, when he saw this property, he fell in love with it too, because when you look at this piece of property, it's not valley floor property. It doesn't run up against a bunch of other vineyards. It's kind of its own entity.
Microcosm.
Right, and we can farm this holistically very much in the sense that the entire piece of property is one entity.
When you first started in education, what was the first component you put into place?
I think it was the tour was the best bit, because we physically wanted to show people this whole piece of property. And I'm always surprised that more wineries don't have physical tours in their vineyards, because everyone sees tanks, stainless steel, a crusher. That's all the same. It's the piece of property that has the uniqueness. So we want to take people out there and show them, kick the dirt clods, if you will.
Right.
That was my favorite part. Right. Get them up on a hillside and you can show them. And once seeing is really believing, that whole thing, a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, it really is. But there's also not just the seeing, there's the smelling, the hearing, the whole experience that really makes a difference. So the tour was the most important part. And then we have this big insectary that is also kind of brings everything together. And people walk through what they think is a vineyard, it turns into this gorgeous flowering garden with every plant having a dual purpose, not only just to look good, but attracting some predatory insect or being a home to some other bird that goes out and eats a bug, whatever it is. It's really neat to see people walk through these gardens and understand that these are beneficial gardens. There's a reason why they're there. Right. I think that's neat. And then probably the other thing that I love is the animals. Because they add, as Rudolf Steiner says, animals bring the personality to the farm. And you see people, I don't know if it harkens back to childhood or things like that, but people love to see the sheep and the chickens and the cows in the field. And it brings back this idea that we are a true farm. And I think, unfortunately, with vineyards is they're often not thought of as a farm. It's right. thought as this chateau or some beautiful place where wine is magically made. But vineyards are working farms, very much so. You get your hands real dirty. It's very laborious work. And it's neat to kind of show people all the work that's done to go into a great bottle of wine. Because let's face it, a great bottle of wine is grown. Mm. It's not manufactured. It's produced in the sense that it's grown, and then a good winemaker shepherds it through its transition into wine. And one of my best sayings is the best impression that a winemaker can leave on his wines is his footprints in the vineyard. Oh. And that's the key part of it. You have to walk your vineyards. And that's the great tenet of biodynamics, is this idea of self-observation. And that's what most people don't think of. You need to be on your property. You need to experience your property. You need to intuit what's going on there, because biodynamics, in a way, you need to be proactive. You have to read the book of nature, if you will, because if you have a problem out in the North 40, you can't go nuke it, okay? You can't put some stuff in the nifty 50 and go out there and spray it. That's not what's going to happen. You have to live with that. So you have to know where the wet spots in the vineyards are, where the dry spots, where the hole in the fence is, all that stuff, so that you can fix it ahead of time and be proactive in it, and that way not have a problem that it's going to ruin your harvest down the line. That's why a lot of the people that work with us have been here since we've been here, because they can walk through the vineyards and they know every plant almost on a first name basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I noticed too when you're placing things like your owl houses and such, you want to make sure you go after the gophers, but not so fiercely that you interrupt the life cycle.
Right, exactly. And it's neat how we made that mistake one time by putting too many owl boxes. And what happened, they fought each other. And then you had owls killing owls, which is something you don't want to have happen. So it's interesting. So you have to have just the right population of everything. And it's really, not to steal that line from that movie, but it's if you grow it, they will come. And it's really neat to see that happen. It doesn't happen often. It took us 6 years. And those were some tough 6 years because the land was damaged. So it has to kind of go through a purification, if you will.
Exactly, just like the human body, everything in life has its cycles.
Absolutely, like a detoxing, if you will.
You can't rush the cycle because it's nature and it has its own cycle.
Yeah.
I remember many times coming here and seeing turkeys up in the vineyards during the winter time and realizing how happy they look.
Yes, yeah,
So,
and pooping right along. You know, that's the great thing about the sheep. In one step, they're eating, clearing the land. Their little cloven hooves are cleaning the vineyard floor, so there's nothing that's going to overwinter and throw out potential mildew spores that you'll have to fight in the spring. And they're dropping the golden turd out the back end, fertilizing, much more gentle on the land than, let's say, a big old tractor or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know I've seen research recently saying that the nature of terroir has a lot to do with the microflora of the soil.
Right, exactly. And you're right, that mycorrhizal growth, it's the plant internet system, if you will. And the healthier that soil is, it's great. And like I said before, I watched this place have terrible soil. It was dead, talc, hard rock or powder. And now you go out there and it's just so much fun to see this beautiful soil in all its glory. And when you dig down through the topsoil and the subsoil into that beautiful area called the regolith, then you really can see what makes Sonoma Mountain and what makes the wine so great here, because it's fractured bedrock. It's like a geological lasagna from basalt and red aggregates and white welded tufa with obsidian chunks in there. It's an amazing layered soils that the root systems now are healthy and going down into those different layers of soil and coaxing out those different nutrients and minerals, getting a wine that truly has a fingerprint of where it is. The wines truly taste where they're grown, the vineyard, what they're made of, Cabernet Sauvignon, when they're grown, 2016. You know, they have all those fingerprints of a place, you know, Sonoma Mountain, Cabernet, 2016. It's amazing to see. And the winemaker, Michael Benziger, for past vintages, and now Andrea Card for future vintages. It's amazing.
Yeah, I always look for wines that feel authentic, which is that is it up the
That's
place.
what biodynamics is. And if I had to put a word to biodynamics, it's a management system for authenticity.
Oh.
That's kind of, if you wanted to put it into, a business school tactic, it's much, much more for that. But if I was going to be a producer and I was going to sell biodynamics to whether it was going to be a vintner or someone with orchards or whatever, or cosmetics, it's all about authenticity. You're going to get flavors out of that piece of property that you never knew you had. And you're going to celebrate your uniqueness. It's going like the Mona Lisa has that crooked smile. That's what biodynamics does so well, is it takes that crooked smile and turning what would be a detriment into a benefit. It would give it that uniqueness, that authenticity.
In fact, I think that's one of the things that most amazes me about it is how it celebrates diversity, even to the plants themselves. We know that plants communicate.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you put them in a situation where there's other types of plants around, they're much happier.
Absolutely.
It's like being part of a big family. I mean,
Right.
we find like the elderly do much better when there's young children in the house.
Right. They kind of communicate in their own way. And there's so much we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is to kind of stop that hubris that we think we have everything under control and that we understand everything. And to kind of take your hands off a little bit of the steering wheel of life and kind of letting it go a little bit and just seeing what happens.
Exactly.
And sometimes you'll be impressed with the results.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
As you can tell from Chris's interview. This is a subject he knows really well, and he's also one of the main salespeople who travels all over the country for Benziger, was at that time. So he's used to talking about biodynamics and making it real for people, making them understand the personal effect, the difference it made in their lives. And I think it's a very important approach to agriculture, and I'm glad that we see it so often here in Wine Country. Like I said, you can find it if you go to Wine Country at Work on YouTube. Scroll down, you'll find the episode. And you can also go to spaceandtime.com/WCAC for Wine Country at Work, and I'll put the link specifically to the show right there. So until next time, come back and see us. I'm Ralph DeAmicis for Wine Country at Work. You all be well.